morning and welcome to another Tuesday Tools video. This week is our 5th video in an 8-week series we're hoping to provide for you here at Faith Assembly of God in Lisbon, North Dakota. Last week we talked about historical context and why that's important to Scripture. And one of the great tools that I mentioned was a Bible commentary. Now, commentaries are great. They're not just for historical context. Depending on the commentary and where it comes from, what the author's goal with the commentary may be, you may learn about what the early church was writing about a specific verse. You may find out why a certain portion of Scripture might have been controversial or learn some church history along with that. You may find more about the region, the culture, the heritage, the practices. Most commentaries will also tell you other scriptures that kind of flesh out the idea of what's going on there or kind of summarize what's been happening in your scripture in particular. Now, before we look at how to use a commentary, I want to kind of talk about the types of commentaries you can find. And the first and foremost one you'll find is one that is specific to a type of author. That might be something like this commentary here, F.F. Bruce's commentary on the Gospel of John and the Epistles of John, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. He does not include the book of Revelation. That could be for a variety of reasons, most likely because Revelation is one of those books that would really need its own volume, right? There's also this commentary I have from it's not from the Apostle Paul, it's from N.T. Wright, who is a scholar who has done a biography on the Apostle Paul, and many of his writings he's expanded upon. And this is in a series that he has called Paul for Everyone, and this focuses on the prison letters, right? So this is going to be Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon, however you want to say it. And then the next thing you're going to see are commentaries that are set on certain books of the Bible. So you'll see things like this commentary on the book of Acts. This is more for Bible studies, things of that nature, your own personal Bible study. This would be one zeroed in on the book of Acts. And I would really recommend, my own personal preference is to get a commentary that zeroes in on a specific book of the Bible. The reason being is they're going to take their time verse by verse and go through that entire book. That's not to say that other works that might have a collection, such as this expository Bible commentary, which covers Romans through Galatians. That's Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians. That's not to say this is useless or bad. Absolutely not. I've used it quite a bit. And then there's the IVP Bible Background Commentary, mostly edited by Craig Keener, who is a scholar that I have a lot of respect for, don't always agree with, and we'll get more into that as we go. But this is something that's going to give you more, this type of background is going to give you more of the archaeological background, the regions, the customs, the geography. It'll talk more about that. And this is the entire New Testament. Okay, so you have to understand what the goal of the author is when they're writing their commentary, what their focus is going to be on, whereas Keener here in this book is referring to just the regions, and he's going to take just portions of Scripture and kind of talk about those. This one is going to kind of go verse by verse or section by section. And then, of course, the one that's zeroed in on the book of Hebrews, like this commentary, for instance, it's going to definitely go a little more specific. So those are things we keep in mind when we're reading commentaries. The most important thing to remember is that while a commentary is a great tool, it is just that. Okay, it's not going to supersede or take precedence over Scripture. It's a tool. It is a reference book, and it's to be treated as such. You're not going to read through a commentary and treat what that author has said as though it's Scripture. He's expanding on his views or what his research can tell you about Scripture. It is not Scripture itself. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you're looking to preach or teach out of a book, one thing to remember is you can commentary a sermon to death. I've done it myself. I've seen others do it. Be careful with how much of the commentary. Sooner or later, it's no longer a message that God's laid on your heart. You're just quoting commentaries, and there's the problem. One author I've read who I do not enjoy, and people really love this guy. I won't say his name, but it's not that he has bad writings. It's just his writing style. Every paragraph is a quote from somebody else. And you're not really an author at that point, in my opinion. You're just kind of like a news aggregate site, right? And that's not to say those things are bad. Drudgereport.com or whatever, they are an aggregation site from news articles from all over the internet, right? That's kind of what people who take only commentaries, and that's all they're putting into their sermons, that's what that is. It's not a sermon. It's a compilation of people's opinions, and it's not exegeting scripture. It's not expositorily preaching a message at that point. You're just giving other people's opinions on things, and that's not what a sermon should be. Before we go on much further, I want to say there is a classic that I always recommend to young Christians specifically. When I say young, I don't necessarily mean age. I just mean maybe they haven't been a Christian for very long. And that is the Matthew Henry Commentary. This is a commentary on the whole Bible. And I've had this thing since I was about 19 years old. I got it on sale for $25 at a Christian bookstore. The price tag says it was $32.99. It is a great resource. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Okay, but it has stood the test of time when discerning the text. There's a lot of good stuff in there. He does do a lot from the King James English type of talking, so you kind of have to bear with that. But you can find a more modernized version of the Matthew Henry Commentary. You can find it on BibleGateway.com. You can look around. The important thing is to know when you're studying these things. Adam Clarke's commentary, for example, is also another classic, by the way. But in my personal opinion, I just don't prefer it to Matthew Henry's. When you're studying these things, remember that you are taking other people's research, and you are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? We're building our study off of other people's studies. So we take what they're saying, we want to cross-reference, we want to see what other people have to say about things. You can take one commentary for your personal Bible study, and that may be fine, but to build a theological stance or doctrine or personal real important belief, we're going to get that from the Bible, and we're going to fact check some of those other people as we can. We want to make sure our sources are good sources, right? We're not CNN. Small joke, sorry. We want to make sure that our sources are valid. And when we're studying these things, I have access to commentaries from the 1920s. Some of the ways that things are worded may not be a good idea to quote exactly in the year 2020, 100 years later, right? But it's also important to know as you're studying, some of these commentaries will tell you what early church fathers like Polycarp or Origen or John Chrysostom or Augustine, people like that, what were they saying way back in the 200s, 300s? Polycarp was like 150 AD. They're very close, much closer to the source material than we are. So it's important to understand what they were talking about, what they were preaching about back then, what was most important to them, and take some of their insight and their thoughts. Some of those guys aren't always going to be great, Arius, Pelagius, guys like that who were later thrown out for heretics. Maybe they did have a good point on a certain specific scripture. Why were they thrown out as a heretic? These are things to also keep in mind, and good commentaries will explain those things to you. But we need to understand the context of the background of the author when we're reading these things. Are they a Calvinist? Are they an Arminian? Are they Pentecostal? Are they Catholic? N.T. Wright, the prison epistles of Paul, he's an Anglican minister. How does that affect what he's saying versus how I might read the Bible as a Pentecostal pastor? Those are things to keep in mind. Now, how do you use a Bible commentary? Well, I'm going to show you today. It's a reference book, right? And we're going to use good old Matthew Henry. And I do have my portion of scripture marked right here, just for quick reference. But what you can do is find the book specifically that you're wanting to study. And I've already found the book of Joshua, right? Can you read that? Book of Joshua. And I'm going to find the chapter. And of course, it's chapter 1. Verse 9 is the scripture that I'm studying for this series of videos that I'm expanding on. And I'm just going to read quickly here on page 221 of this commentary as to what Matthew Henry's insights into Joshua 1:9 are. Now, what's Joshua 1:9? If you remember, it's, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And we've discussed, as we've looked at context, we understand from the literal context within the Bible that Moses has passed away. Joseph is getting ready to take the people of Israel into the promised land. He might be nervous. He might be scared. He might have a lot of worry. These are people who are ready to turn on Moses at the drop of a hat. Will they do the same thing to him? Will they want to go worship idols as soon as they're in the promised land? These are things Joshua's probably thinking about. They're probably in the back of his mind, if not in the very forefront of his mind. And so this is where God has kind of told Joshua, hey, calm down. I've got you. I've got your back. I've commanded you to do this. You're going to succeed. And this is what Matthew Henry says. That he encourage himself in this with the promise and peace of God and make these his support. Joshua had long since proven his valor in the war with Amalek. And he's going back into the books of the law, the Pentateuch, or the Torah, they're normally called. And in his descent from the report of the evil spies. Joshua was humble, not distrustful of God, but unsure of himself and of his sufficiency for the work. And therefore God repeats this so often. Be strong and courageous. Have not I commanded you? In other words, he's saying, I've commanded the work to be done, so I'm going to help you get it done. And that's actually what he says right here. It will help very much to stir and embolden us, and this is Matthew Henry speaking. It will help very much to stir and embolden us if we keep our eye on the divine warrant and hear God saying, have I not commanded you? I will therefore help you, succeed you, and accept you, and reward you. If God has a calling on your life, this is the general message that I'm getting from this particular commentary. As God had a call on Joshua's life, you don't have to be afraid. Yes, you're going to face opposition. Joshua, we know, certainly faced opposition from inside the camp and outside, but God is behind him. So we know that he's going to have success in the long run, right? And that's what Matthew Henry is saying here. He's just reinforcing that. Now, if I wanted to zero in further, I would take another book that is a commentary on Joshua. I have the Layman's Bible book right here. It focuses on Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. Well, what does it say about verse 9? Verse 9 is a summary verse for the section. Matthew Henry's already said that. So, okay, at least two authors are kind of in agreement here. We might paraphrase verse 9 this way. Let me say it to you again. Be strong, be courageous, don't be afraid, and don't be dismayed. Why? Because Joshua was so capable and because the work before him was so easy. Nope, not at all. Rather, because the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Can't you see why, after this encounter with God, Joshua was ready to shoulder any responsibility and face any foe? He had received his divine commission for his task. Well, that's encouraging. That's a blessing, right? If God has called Joshua to this, then he's going to take him through this. That's kind of what we're seeing here. It's not always the case. When God called the early apostles and the early church, he called them to it. They didn't always get through it. Sometimes they ended up being fed in the Roman Colosseum to wild beasts. But in the end, yes, they did, because they got to be with Christ. So that's something to remember. Now, if you look in something like this, the background commentary, it's not going to focus on a specific verse. When you look in the portion of Joshua here, there is no portion for verse 9. I don't know if you can see that on the video. It covers verse 4, and it talks about the territory of the promised land. Verse 8 talks about the law, and that's what this commentary picks up. It does not specifically get into God's divine promise to Joshua. So I'm not going to use that so much. I might if I'm wanting to flesh out the territory where Joshua was going, but I'm not going to use that in my personal Bible study for Joshua 1:9 specifically, unless I need that other information for the surrounding verses, the context. So with all that said, I think it's pretty much done for this week, but I will tell you this. Take out a commentary, go online, go to BibleGateway.com, find you Matthew Henry, find you Adam Clark, or whoever you'd like. Find a good commentary on your scripture. And in the comments below, after you've subscribed and liked this video and all of that, in the comments below, tell us something you've learned. Something you've learned from reading that stuff about your specific verse. Maybe it's a new insight into God's character. Maybe it's an insight into yourself or the early church or the territory, whatever it is, leave it in the comment down below. And until then, we'll see you next week. And God bless you guys. Bye.